Hey guys, and welcome back to StarMade. This is Serge, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're going to do something, what I want to start calling quick tips. And in this little episode, and in episodes like it in the future, we're going to be talking about design tips and building tips and just anything that I know well that I want to tell you guys about and teach you guys how to do. And I might even get some other players in, some other guests who can jump in and tell you all about how they build their ships and how they make their ships look amazing or function amazing. And we're going to go over some basic things. Today we're going to just talk about something really simple, and that's choosing a palette. Now, it's really important to have something in your mind about how you want your ship to look, and obviously one of the biggest aspects to appearance and aesthetics is color. Color is very, very, very important to most of us. Unless you're colorblind or something, it's going to be the first thing that you can really describe to someone about what you see. I mean, if you see the sky is blue. You see the grass is green. A lot of people have immediate images in their mind when thinking of a particular color. Good images and bad images, pleasant ones, or just mundane ones that just really just immediately have their opinion and altered in one way or another. And this can really, I guess, affect how you want to pick a color to suit your, I guess, ship or the kind of style you're going for. I guess what you really need to consider is, one, how will it look, and will it look good? And two, what will it make people feel? Now, I don't want to get all artsy in this because it is important to realize that in some scenario, for example, the Atlas group, you may not have a lot of control in the colors you're using. I don't have control in the Atlas colors. The colors were chosen well before my time in the faction. And honestly, I've had to grow accustomed to them. I honestly did not like the colors when I joined. But I really, really have grown attached to the colors now, and I can't imagine Atlas any other way. What I gotta say, though, is it doesn't really change the palette. Atlas has a clear and obvious color palette, and not all Atlas ships follow this palette exactly. Tyzeek and JRL over at the Emerald Gate on our server don't follow the colors all the time. A lot of their ships are very, very flashy, very bright and vibrant, and have very different color schemes. Whereas Shaker, one of our CEOs, and as far as I'm aware, one of the main founders of the actual faction, builds almost entirely in that color because I guess that was his choice. But it's very important to understand that it's gonna affect what people see when they see your ship, and it's important to know how to make your ship look nice, or rather have an appeal. It's kind of like dressing up to wear a suit if you're going to an important meeting. It's not necessarily just to make yourself look nice, but it's to show that you put in that effort. And when you put in effort to make a ship look good, I think that's really important in really any aspect of life. So, without getting all philosophical on us all, we're gonna take a quick look at a couple of examples I have set before us. Both of these are Valkyr, my Valkyr class cruiser, which most people are familiar with. Or I suppose you probably call this a frigate. I'm not sure exactly of the classification. Some people would argue that it's a fighter, but I think it's way too big for that. Long story short, though, you can see these two little squares I have right here. And they represent the ships, obviously, opposite them in a mirror. So you can see this brown, blue, and gray palette here, and you got the green, orange, and gray palette here. It's pretty obvious which ones they reflect. I don't think I need to spell that out. And I've also got a couple lights thrown in here as well, and I'll tell you why in a second. So this is the simplest palette that I could possibly put together of these two. You will notice there's some colors missing, some things missing entirely, like obviously the black hull. I don't have black in that palette, which I'll explain shortly as well. And there's a bit of red on both of them. No red there. And obviously hazard stripes. No hazard stripes. So there are definitely things that I've not included in the palette, but this is what I'm calling a simple palette. We can talk about a more complicated palette in another episode, But this is sort of an idea to kind of keep it simple, keep it in the mind, and understand what you're hoping to achieve. Long story short, let's talk about this one immediately to our right here. So this is my original Valkyr back before I joined the Atlas faction. I decided to go with a brown color for a lot of my ships, as that was my faction colors up until that time. Now, I chose the brown color because it was an industrial sort of color, and I felt it made a bit of a bronzy look, sort of like a bit of like, not necessarily rusty, but a bit of a bronzy look. And I like the color blue that accentuated that as an accent on that actual brown hull, which I think looks pretty good. So I was pretty stoked thinking of those two ideas as far as colors go, and then you have to consider what is this? It's a spaceship. And so because it's a spaceship, something I like to do is I like to pick a color for the main hull, and then you have an offset color. Now this offset color can be anything. For instance, you can make a pallet, and you can have the main hull. Let me just turn that down for a second. So you can have the main color blue, and you can have the off color red. And of course, you get a slightly different effect. Now, if I were to make that entire ship everywhere, if you can make, I guess you'll have to imagine this, as I'm not going to be able to really do this real easy. But if you can imagine everywhere there's brown on that ship is suddenly blue, and everywhere there's gray on that ship is suddenly red, you can already see a very, I guess, clashing sort of an effect. It's a very, very violent sort of effect. You don't get the same appeal. You don't get the same kind of starship appeal. You kind of lose the mechanical effect, I guess, a bit, and it starts to look a lot more cartoony. And if that's if that's what you're trying to aim for, by all means. But if we say take out that blue for just a second, and we replace everywhere that's blue with, let's say, black. That's the wrong black. Let's say dark gray. So if we replace everything that was red with dark gray, we get a much more, I guess, different kind of an effect. So let's just jump over here really quick and let's look at what the same thing would look like with a red in there. There's no reason you can't mix two colors and have them kind of like aside from each other. But this is what I'm showing you how of things that I understand and I know well. So effectively what we've done here is we've kind of started the palette on two separate colors of the Valkyr. And this will be a red Valkyr and a blue Valkyr. Now, one thing we got to think of immediately is what color would look well with red and blue. And we got to think of a kind of an accentuating color. All I'm going to do for the purpose of this demonstration is we're going to go ahead and we're going to invert both of them. So we're going to have blue, we're going to have red with a blue stripe, and we're going to have blue with a red stripe. Now I can already sort of in my mind imagine how that's going to look. I think actually that's going to be pretty cool. It's going to have a pretty interesting effect. I'm actually kind of digging it here. I'm already sort of thinking about how cool that's going to look. So what we're going to have to also think about is obviously the darker color of the two. I should say the shader. This is what I like to call a shader. For that secondary color, you kind of want to have a shader. And that's so that you can have a different effect. So you can show off certain parts of the ship as different components, different parts, and allows you to use more colors without using more colors. Now you can do the same thing with stuff like yellow and orange. So you can do the same thing with yellow and orange, which works pretty well. Red and pink maybe, pink and purple maybe, teal and blue, teal and green. We've almost got a spectrum here enough to do this with a lot of colors. Obviously there's some exceptions like brown doesn't really work well. Green, it's a bit hard to justify teal and green. Teal and blue, yeah, it doesn't look so bad, but some of them just you can't gradient very well. The exception being, I guess, is that you don't necessarily have to gradient if you can go ahead and make a plated ship. Now, I'm going to take a bit off the rails here for a second and just talk about what I like to do. I like to do a little something with a lot of my builds, and I like to call it plating. Where Yusuf, I mean, this is not the best ship to use as an example of this. I might be able to load in a ship with a better example. Give me 1 second, guys. Ooh, what's a good example? What's a good example? I can't think of one, guys. No, I might have to give that a miss. Do I have that sledge? No, I'm really sorry, guys. I don't have a good example for you. You know what? Do I have... Actually, I'll just load the sledge. Where are you? Just had it on there. Apparently I don't. Huh. Anyway, guys, as a bit of an example, I guess... let's just go the dredge. The dredge. Yeah, the dredge works. Where are you, dredge? So, as an example, guys, ooh, whoa, what's going on? Okay, so here's an example here of my old dredge. So the old dredge is sort of a good example of using that old palette, the brown palette. The brown palette kind of, as you can see here, the primary colors are that dark gray there and the brown, with the dark gray sort of offsetting it off a little bit. Now I'm going to use the dredge later on in an episode of this, explaining a bit of some other effects you can use. But as you can see, I've used the dark gray and the light gray sort of in the areas that they are together to sort of create obviously different parts. So it's in a very obvious where one part is and where one part stops and one part begins. Back to the pallets though. Let's continue with these extra pallets we're working on. The plating I like to do, it allows you to sort of trick the eye into seeing more of one color than it actually is. So effectively what that means is you're using a bright, vibrant color, like red or blue or brown, as vibrant as it is, and green, sort of as a way to trick the eye into thinking there's a lot more of that color than there actually is. Realistically, in both of these, there's a lot more black and there's a lot more grays than there is the green and the brown. But you wouldn't describe this as a as a gray-black ship with brown or green on it. You describe it as a green ship or a brown ship because that's the color that's immediately drawing our eye. So you don't have to actually use an entire lot of the same color in order to get that same effect. So let's just grab a bunch of random colored blocks here. We're going to go yellow, and I'm going to go of these lights here, so we're going to go that. So this is another thing you have to think of when thinking of color, your palettes, and that's the lights. And the reason being is when you turn them on, they give your palettes different shades. And that means that your colors that you're using for your palette will take on a different color to the eye when those lights are on. So this is what you have to consider when you consider stuff like thrust. For instance, on the green one, orange is the color of the thrust, and on the brown one, blue is the color of the thrust. And when you think of the weapons on both are both red. So that's something you have to think of as well. Now, of course, you can just close your weapons up, and I guess that makes the most combat sense. But we're talking about design here. We're trying to make things look pretty. So for both of these, for the example I'm going to use for both of these, we're going to use yellow thrusters. And then on the red, we're going to use blue weapons. And on the blue, we're going to use pink weapons. Now, you've got to think about how these are going to look when you actually have them in action. Now, I don't mind the blue weapons. I think that actually looks pretty cool. You got a pretty chill look. It's very, very... I don't know. I don't have a good word for that. I guess it's very... sporty almost, like not super serious. It's not a ship that I guess to be taken super seriously, but it is a little bit more, I guess, vibrant. Whereas over here you've got a blue ship with pink lights. I don't know. I just don't necessarily think I like the pink. Now, if that's what you want to go for, that's what you want to go for. If you want a blue ship with a red stripe and pink weapons, by all means. But if we say we go into our menu here and we're gonna pick green weapons. Yeah, let's go green over that pink. Let's throw that in there. Now that's a blue ship with green weapons. I don't know. Look, this is just an example. Like, leave your comments in the comments below, obviously, how you think this is going to look. But at the end of the day, this is an example I'm trying to give you guys. Let's just quickly grab that black, because we're going to need that as I continue on with a little bit more of what I'm talking about. So another thing it's important to remember is a lot of the time you'll use black hull. Or at least I do. A lot of the time I use black hull. There's always going to be a wild card color thrown in there somewhere. Black is not that wild card. Black is what I like to refer to as the base. A lot of the ships I build either have a gray or a black base. And that's something you can sort of work off of. Think about how you're going to use that color to accentuate the rest, or not to accentuate, that's a bad word to use. I should probably say frame the rest. So you're using the black to essentially frame the rest of them. I'm getting a little carried away here. So as far as it goes, guys, it's important to find yourself a palette. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, to wrap this all up, it's important to stick to your palette. The really important thing, real important thing, that if you can take anything away from this quick video on just simple design on using a palette, is that a simple palette should be that thing in the back of your mind that you're thinking, how is this going to look and what colors am I going to start with? You should have your palette in your mind, not necessarily immediately when you start building, but the very moment you start thinking of color, the very moment you start laying down colored blocks, should be the moment that you start thinking about what is the color you are going to use to make your ship stand out from the rest. Now, obviously, in smaller ships, you can change that without much effort. But when you start building big ships, you're going to find yourself in a bit of a hassle. You're going to really not want to go back and change the color. So you really need to make that decision fast, and you got to stick to it. You got to stick to your guns. Obviously, I've changed the color on the ship already, and I plan to do more in the future. But at the end of the day, it's not difficult to sit there, work out a bit of an idea in your mind about what's your palette, what are you going to paint with, what is your vision of what your ship is going to look like. And ultimately, that's where you got to sort of draw the line. When you've got your palette, you got to try and stick to it. Because if you start variating from that, you end up with ships that just look a little bit busy, that don't really have any cause of action. And, you know, you go from being a beautiful Michelangelo or Leonardo painting to something done by Jackson Pollock the night after a big bender. It's, at the end of the day, something that you want to consider when you're painting your ship. Now, I keep using that word painting because effectively that's what you're doing. You're using colors to create something. And obviously there's a lot more effort that goes into building a ship, like design, small details, sectioning off the ship to make it look interesting, making parts actually look like they are what they are. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to forethought and design choices. And one of those design choices you have to make early is a palette. So guys, this has been Serge with my first quick tip. I'm probably going to rename that in the future. I don't know. I just thought of it really quick because it's quite late here, and I was going to put that together this afternoon. I got carried away. I've been playing a lot of Fallout recently. I love that game. But anyway, guys, this has been Serge. If you like this video, leave your comments in the comments below and smash that like button like your life depends on it. Also, if you dislike the video, leave a dislike because, yeah, that's an option. If you have any questions on the video, please leave them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer anything you'd like to know about design. And if you think I've been a little vague, or if you think I've gone a bit too in-depth with some of this stuff, please let me know as well. I'd really like to hear your guys' feedback on what you think. I'd also like to hear back from people who really are interested in designing ships, as I'd like to do more review episodes, and I'd also like to get some guests in on these episodes, these ones here. Now, obviously, I'm not just going to invite every Tom, Dick, and Harry on. I'd really like to see your work, and if you do a really good job, and if I really appreciate the kind of stuff you do, please show me, because that would be pretty awesome. And I would definitely like to get some of the big names in here to talk about design, because I think design is a bit more than a, follow these steps, do it this way. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, voila. It's a little bit more complicated than that, as everyone has their own techniques. But there is an aspect of what is good and what isn't. And I think that's sort of an agreed upon thing when people come to an agreement of sort of, none of us like this, some of us like this, but most of us don't, that kind of thing. It's a, it's a discussion, and I think we need to have it. So guys, this has been Serge, and yeah, if you want to let me know what you think about this video, you know what to do. Catch you guys later.